Hello, everybody. This is Ryan from My Try Running Programs, and we are into week 3 of the Hal Higdon Personal Best Marathon Training Program, and some minor changes this week in that we have one easy run that actually bumps up into the 4 mile range. That's very exciting. And now the hill reps are up to 4 by hill versus 3 by hill. And now we're getting into 5 additional minutes of speed work per week. So not a huge amount. In my case, that's probably somewhere around 3/4 of a mile or so of additional speed work. But the extra hill rep does add up to a little bit more distance, given that I'm somebody who runs those as more medium to long distance type runs. And then the long run dropped back down to about 6 miles this week. So once again, a pretty short, medium distance long run for this particular week. So with that being said, we'll kind of go over what the week looked like. And in this particular week, we're looking at roughly about 31.5 miles. The only real major change is the drop off in vertical gain because all of this running was done more near my home where it tends to be a little bit flatter because I live in a valley. So with that being said, it made that kind of aspect of the running a little bit easier, I suppose. So with that being said, the easy runs were run at a very, very easy pace. You can see I kept them in the high eights for one of my morning runs. Then I did my speed work a little bit earlier this week on a Tuesday, just fit into my schedule best. And so with the tempo run, that's what I decided to do first versus the hill work. You can see the first mile, super, super easy. I was literally just kind of like, waddling my way to the stoplight where I start my tempo session. And I've always said this, right where I hit this intersection of Baranda and Natividad in my area of Salinas, I then just shoot out of there like a gun and just go flying as fast as I can. Now, within reason, of course. Now, what I found as I was kind of going back through and looking at this particular run's data is that you can see that the work miles I kind of sped up relatively from a 7:18 to a 7:15 to a 6:52, and then started to slow down a little bit in the final 2 miles at the 6:58 and a 7:03. But this was a much faster average overall if we look at that work comparative to the first week's 30-minute tempo run. This arguably might be, minus today's speed session that you'll see in a future video, might be probably my best speed work so far for the year, and certainly for this program. Felt really good, felt really controlled. One of the things that I avoided here was the amount of, and I talked about this last week, I actually lowered the amount of caffeine. I had a little bit. I like to use a little bit of caffeine on a day where I'm going to be working a little hard when it comes to my running. And so I think lowering that dosage and lowering that yohimbine dosage it just acted as a motivator versus as something that you would use for maybe more of a thermogenic fat burning effect. And so I think it kept my motivation really high, and it kind of almost, for lack of a better way of putting it, kind of made my legs feel a little bit more springier. So I think it's all just personal feeling and perception. I don't think there's any real performance enhancement, if you will, from using those two things together, but it certainly felt good there. And what I liked about this run, and if you look at it, I kind of slowly got faster over the course of this run, especially for the first 3 to 4 miles, and then still kept it a little bit faster in the end with just bigger dips as we got near the end of that particular tempo session. So overall, I felt like it went really, really well. The only thing I would have liked to have done is add a little bit more of a cool down, but I was trying to rush home to do an additional, high intensity interval training workout with my wife. So with that being said, I had to keep my cool down a little bit shorter than I probably would have liked to. But I like that consistent kind of ramp up over time. You can see it just slowly got faster and faster net over the course of the run, minus some dips where there might be a little bit of elevation change and things of that nature. So this was a very good controlled effort. Another huge thumbs up to the Saucony Freedom 4 for its, the way it's making me feel. And once again, that could just be the way my mind is perceiving that my foot feel in those shoes. But I think any runner would say how you feel is almost as important as how you do. So it certainly has been a huge positive in my training, feeling like I can go out and push myself pretty hard on these runs. Now, when we go back into the Strava data for the week, my 4 mile easy run was just that, very, very easy, kept it at about an average low 9 pace. And my other easy run and short distance easy run was kept right around the 9-minute pace as well. For the second big hill workout, or second big speed session, I should say, that was that 4 by hill workout with warm up and cool down. And you can see I ran quite a bit of mileage for this. This was a run that I kind of mapped out in my mind at work. And I felt like I'm not going to probably run it super fast because it's going to be such a long distance, but I'm going to try to do this where I run an uphill, 4 uphills really, really hard. I'm going to run the downhills at a medium intensity and then run anything flat or uphill that aren't considered the work hills at an easy rate. And that's kind of how I've decided to do my hill sessions from here on out. So there's a little bit more work in there than I think truly what Hal, envisions for a hill workout. I've talked about this many times before, but he envisions you finding a 400-meter distance of a hill and then running that really hard a few times up and running it down hard, maybe once for every 2 or 3 uphill efforts that you're making. So I'm certainly doing it different than he prescribes without question, but I think it's what works best for me based on, where I'm at right now in my current running. So with that being said, you can see the overall elevation gain in this run is not all that much, 170 total vertical gain in terms of feet over the course of 9 miles. So once again, very little. And the 4 hills that I ran were relatively quite short. The first one I did kind of down here on Baranda. You get past kind of the Independence intersection, and it starts in kind of a rolling uphill, but then it goes to a more firm uphill. You can see right at the end, the grade picks up to about 2-3% or so. And that's where it felt a little bit hard in that first rep. So I kept that right around the mid sixes, sometimes dipping more closer to 7. And so it's a relatively short rep, right around probably I'd say about a quarter of a mile or so, maybe a little bit longer. And then a short break, and then a longer rep down here at the bottom of Baranda. You kind of go downhill for probably about a mile or so. And then you come back out and you have a longer hill that you can see kind of goes from right around here-ish, right about the 2.7 mile mark. We start a long uphill near Natividad Park, and it goes all the way uphill, first a little intensely, and then much more gradually to about Sanborn Road. And so I ran that rep, once again, roughly around the mid sixes and ran it relatively hard until I got just close to about Sanborn Road. So this one came out to about more of a 0.4, 0.5 mile. So about a half-mile rep on that particular one, and then kept it easy again until I wrapped around Williams Road and Freedom Parkway. Then you're coming back another side on the back side, I should say, of Natividad Park. And then that's another one where it has a quick dip down into a valley and then it, pops back up into a quick hill. You can see it right here in the Strava data, how that looks. So I ran that pretty hard downhill, high fives at one point, and then tried to run it as hard as I could up to the top of it in around the 6:20 or so pace. And that was a very, very super short compact hill that had a nice long, mile plus of easy kind of rest repetition. And then at my final hard rep on Laurel Road, this is kind of near the Natividad Hospital area, there's another nice hill that picks up there with the intersection of roughly Laurel and Natividad. And so I ran that in, once again, low sixes, but it's a shorter rep, right around about maybe 0.3, 0.4 miles. So probably right around a third to maybe close to a half mile by the time you finish it. And then the rest was easy running back towards my home. So overall, I felt like this was a pretty good run. You can see on average kept a lot of this between the work, the medium, and the easy intensities right around the mid sevens, some in the low eights. So I felt like this was a really good sustained longer effort. I think this made my legs feel a lot stronger mentally, so I could take on more taxing workouts in the program as we get a little bit further on and there starts to be more and more repetitions. This just gave me some good confidence. I don't think it was a terribly fast run, but it was a run where I just felt like I had achieved what I had set out to do based on the way that I had envisioned the run. And a lot of times that's just half the battle right there. So then as we kind of close out the week, after that, I ended with my 6 mile long run. Once again, kept it pretty much right around my standard areas I run. This time, the only thing I did different was I kept it within kind of this little valley area that I like to run into every so often where it's all dirt trails. And the reason I do that, well, I should say it's a little bit of mixed use because there is some road running involved there, but about 4 of the 6 miles come out to being on dirt trails. And the reason I like doing this particular run is that it takes a little bit of pressure off my lower half. If I'm starting to feel some, maybe a little bit of, runner's knee, if I'm starting to feel maybe a little bit like my, my fascia, my feet are getting a little stiff, can be a good way for me to recover while still getting in what was intended with that long run. So you can see kept it very, very consistently in around the 8 mile range, outside of kind of a nice little warm-up mile in the 9 minute pace. But really nothing crazy to report here. It was just a pretty standard medium distance 6 mile run for the long run effort for this particular week. So with that being said, what did the Runalyze data look like? Well, because as I alluded to before, there was this big drop off in the amount of stimulants such as caffeine and yohimbine I was using, you can see my VO2 max looked much, much better for this particular week in comparison to the past week. So for the first easy run, that came out to around an averaged VO2 max of 51.7. The more tempo run work effort was 52.78, which is really good. Normally my heart rate spikes much, much higher on a speed day. So for it to only get up into about the 80% range was a big, big positive for sure. And then really the rest of them, you can see 49 for one of the easy days, 53 for the other easy day. And then for the hill workout, this was one of the better VO2 maxes of the week, came out to 53 for that longer sustained 9 mile run, where I was doing a mix of hard, medium, and easy running. So to see that VO2 max kind of return from that effort, that's exactly what you would want to see from that type of training effort. And then in that final long distance run, your long run, it came out to a 52. So that averaged out to about a 52 for that particular week. And then in comparison from week 3 to week 2, you can see that average the prior week was 48. So 4 points of improvement in 1 week in your VO2 max. You can see really firsthand how much those stimulants were impacting really the raw data that I was getting. So I'm feeling a lot better keeping the amount of caffeine I'm ingesting down and keeping the amount of yohimbine that I'm ingesting down. And so for the marathon shape for this comparison, I think it ended up being roughly about a minute or so faster. So you can see once again in week 2, it theorized that I could run a marathon if I'm doing enough training and long enough runs to come out to about a 720 per mile pace or about a 312. And in this particular week, by the end of it, it assumed that now I could run maybe a 310 marathon at a 716 per mile pace. And once again, I'm not running enough mileage for this to hold true. And as that time gets faster, Runalyze is expecting you to run more and more, which will truly happen as we get through this program. So with that being said, all of the data is pointing to a nice big improvement as it came out to my average VO2 max this week being a little bit above 50. And my goal, as I alluded to at the start of this program, is to try to get to a 51 by maybe early June. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we'll certainly give that a good shot. So as I'm continuing to train, I'm certainly already seeing a good return on these more intense kind of speed work days. This is why I really like Hal Higdon's programs. I feel like my body is designed very well for them and that it handles these 2 speed efforts really, really well. It recovers decently on the easy runs. And then right now, as the long run is quite short, that actually ends up being somewhat of a longer recovery run in and of itself. So overall, I would say this was a very successful week. I was very, very happy with it. Look forward to reporting week 4 to you guys quite soon. I hope your training is going well. And with that being said, take care.